Okay, it is raining rather hard outside, so if you hear something weird, I'm gonna blame Mother Nature. This is a question a few others on YouTube have tried to answer in the past, and I understand why it keeps coming up, because there's really no solid answer. Should you buy a graphics card you suspect was used for mining? We've got several variables to consider, and I'm gonna cut straight to the point in this video. So the first thing you need to do is look at a graphics card like a mini computer. You've got the GPU, essentially a small motherboard underneath, soldered RAM, a dedicated cooling system, rear I/O, and ports for both power and data transfer. All of this results in often a pretty expensive card. You could spend anywhere from like $10 to $10,000 on one in the new market. But cards depreciate pretty fast, and a lot of this is tied to the fact that people don't trust used hardware, especially used graphics cards, especially if they were used for mining. I mean, can I blame you? You got no idea how the card was treated. Was it casually gaming or 24/7 mining? What all should you consider when you target the used market and come across a card that looks super suspect? If you think it was used for mining, here's what I advise you do. First, make sure you're shopping on trustworthy websites. I recommend eBay for starters. That's just a good place to get familiar with the buying and selling of components. Buyer protection guarantee on eBay is definitely a good thing. It's saved me more than once. Amazon's also pretty okay, as is Newegg, but the problem with these sites is that you can't verify the integrity of anything, so the card could have god-awful coil whine. A fan could be dead, more on that later. It could also be running super hot, and that would be super out of the ordinary. So you're taking a risk. Every purchase comes with a bit of that, but used components especially, that's why people keep the tin full of hats on. And again, I don't really blame you. It's your money. You choose how to spend it. But only websites that publicize a strong money-back guarantee are the ones I would dabble with. The exception to this is like a site similar to Craigslist, where you'd actually get to meet the seller in person and possibly inspect the component firsthand. Just make sure you're extra careful and bring a friend if you absolutely need to go inside someone's house, which is probably what you'll have to do if your goal is to see the card working right in a system before buying. It's kind of sketchy when it gets personal. Now, let's throw out a hypothetical. Let's say you meet this person in an office and notice they've got a mining farm pimped out in the closet, and the card he's trying to sell you is identical to the ones running in that closet. You start sweating, right? You don't want to be awkward and leave without asking questions, so understandably, you pop the question. Was this card used for mining? There's really no way you'll know unless they confess or you see it pulled from the farm firsthand. And this is the case with online sellers as well, right? It's one gamble. So if you can verify that the card works, then you're off to a good start. And that's obviously, I think, the first concern people have when they buy used. My next recommended course of action would be to tear the card apart, especially if the card's several years old and out of warranty. A lot of Pascal cards come with 3-year warranties, which means buying them used at this point may mean you won't be able to send it in for repair free of charge. This is another aspect of the used market of which the buyer should be aware. Not too many people talk about it, but it is something you should consider. If the warranty's void, I encourage you to disassemble it, if not for anything else other than to replace the GPU's thermal compound. It probably needs a replacement after about 2 or 3 years. You can also take this opportunity to remove dust and ensure that thermal pads are present and in good condition. If you notice any bulging caps or leaky resistors, this may be a sign that the board is on the brink of failure and has been running very hot for very long amounts of time. You'll never really know until it happens. Again, you just kind of gotta prepare for these things. I researched far and wide, and across dozens of forums, I came to the conclusion that graphics card fans probably fail more than anything else. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, they're really the only moving parts of the entire graphics card system and are stressed beyond belief when things get toasty. As such, I advise only buying used cards whose fans are easily replaceable. Many Zotac fans, for example, can be found here on Amazon on the cheap. These here are Asus Strix fans, a bit more expensive, but you get the point. So it all comes down to what you think will be easier to replace in the long run. I don't have a huge sample size from which to draw any serious conclusions here, and I mean, there's too much data out there to even gather and form a conclusion around. So I'd be willing to bet, though, a majority of mining cards will see their fans fail before anything else, which is a good thing if you're willing to take the risk and make the quick swap. Also, a lot of miners will just run the fans at 100% RPM the entire time the cards are mining, just to make sure that the cards stay cool. And another thing, miners have been known to undervolt their cards to maximize margins. Since mining is resource intensive and requires large amounts of power over long amounts of time, many will choose to undervolt by, say, 10% and reap the benefits of only a 5% reduction in effective hashing. It's just an example, but hopefully you get the point. So despite many of these mining cards running 24/7, or at least cyclically, right, many of them are running more efficiently efficiently as a result, and don't reach those toasty 100 degrees Celsius T-junctions as often as you might think. That and most modern cards throttle themselves anyway, so I wouldn't be too worried about the cards overheating. Unless the room is horribly ventilated or something. But even then, the cards would still probably shut off. The whole system would shut off before anything overheated on a relatively new card. So you could imagine a car, let's say, running on cruise control for several days. Apart from stopping for gas, which is the obvious, nothing about such a journey should be too taxing for the car. I mean, MPG is usually pretty good on the highway. Temperatures are usually in check because you're just running at 1,000 or 2,000 RPM. Maybe not 1,000 RPM, but it's a steady just approach to travel. And that's kind of how I think about mining. It's probably doing it more justice than it deserves, but mining is like cruise control for graphics cards. I mean, yeah, they're running 24/7 and they're working pretty hard, but if they're undervolted and the fan curves are ramped all the way up, these cards aren't getting very hot. And I don't really see too much wrong with that in the grand scheme of things, unless of course they've been running for 10 years straight, at which point, yeah, avoid that thing. And like we said earlier, people ramp up fan speeds and undervolt, which means that the lifespan of the card is actually increased by quite a bit. Now, on the contrary, cards used for gaming are like cars that only run in the city. They stop and go a lot, often accelerate quickly to attain desired speeds in a short amount of time. They have worse MPG. They get very hot quickly and then cool down just as fast because it's stop, go, stop, go. I know this isn't a perfect analogy, but I hope it gets you thinking about the differences in usage, right? I mean, graphics cards used for gaming are idling or they're being used pretty hard and they're reaching, temperatures usually that require the cards to throttle their own frequencies. So you could look at that multiple ways, but like I said, I just want you to think about it. I'm really indifferent to this idea that mining makes cards perform worse in the long run or decreases the lifespan dramatically. Cards don't just randomly die. Usually, like I said, it's a fan or something along those lines. How many GPUs do you know just stop working? Like specifically the GPUs or CPUs for that matter. So I think there are other aspects of the board to take into consideration, not necessarily the most expensive component. And if you send this in, and let's say it's an MSI card, MSI is pretty good usually about their RMA processes and will even honor warranties outside of their 2 or 3 year periods. They may charge you, I don't know, $40 to replace a couple fans or to replace a few caps on the board. Usually it's not the entire board or the GPU itself that needs to be replaced. I totally understand if that's nothing you want to deal with, right? You just want peace of mind, you want to buy new. I get it, but for the people who are on the fence about buying used, this is stuff you should consider. And to tie into my last point, you gotta feel out the seller, who you're buying from. And what I mean by that is this: if he or she is forthcoming, right, honest, appears genuine overall, you probably don't have too much to worry about. That was a huge gust of wind, even if the card was mined with. So this will be easier to do when dealing in person, obviously, but you can still manage online. Ask questions, eBay lets you do that. You can gauge answers by their tones, points of hesitation, word choices. It's your job, right, to ask these questions. You're the buyer. This is due diligence. This is the definition of it. Before you commit, you gotta question. If you don't, and you also fail to inspect the card either prior to purchase or immediately after receiving, it's your own fault. That's why many websites promote 7, 14, or 30-day return policies. It's your chance to decide if you're happy with the product and to verify that it is actually as advertised. And I've got to say that I honestly have no problem buying used, even when I suspect the cards in question have been mined with. A few of my GTX 1080s I suspected were mined with because the seller was actually selling like 4 of them. I don't know too many people who have just 4 GTX 1080s laying around. They were all the same model, but I didn't care. I got them for $300. The GTX 1080s sell for still $400 today, maybe more than that in some places. So I saw it as a good deal. Those cards work fine. If they didn't work out of the box when I bought them, I'd file a claim or I'd message the seller directly and we'd work on the refund. Again, buyer protection guarantee. It's there to protect the buyer from sellers who are trying to scam you or who might mislead you into buying a product you didn't know wasn't functioning correctly. I've also gotten several Maxwell cards from eBay, 9080 Ti's, 970s, kind of detailed in this video here, all from eBay, and even found a few great deals on RX cards for good measure. A rule of thumb though is to stick with Maxwell or earlier on NVIDIA side to minimize your risk of mining exposure, right? So newer cards are more efficient and thus more desirable in the eyes of miners. They're trying to save money, maximize profit, but that said, it's difficult to turn down an RX 570 for $100, especially when the pictures revealed just how clean it really was, even if you suspect it was mined mining, I just don't see it as a justifiable reason to avoid such a good deal, especially if the card still works. Now, a lot of this obviously is my opinion. It's totally just based on my own experience with the used market. So if anything, I'm just trying to convince you that you should consider the used market in the future. I'm not telling you should buy used over new, especially if it was mined with. I know that's a gamble. To what extent it's a gamble, it just depends. It's on a card-to-card basis. But if your goal is to save money, I think it's worth a shot. I will close, though, by saying that I'm not the only one who has an opinion on this. Obviously, many other tech tubers, especially out there, have voiced their concerns, either been against this or for this. You can find videos to 2 prominent tech tubers linked below. For now, though, I'm going to sign off and let you guys listen to them. So leave your feedback down below. Always sure to check out the comment section for sure. Thumbs up, thumbs down, you know what to do. Click that red subscribe button if you're feeling special, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us, and I hope you guys enjoy what you're about to hear from 2 friends of mine.
I feel that they're screwing people. I think that since these mining cards are almost used to the point of non-existence, there should be something out there, a law, something that says, these cards should be acknowledged as, hey, this card was used in mining, almost kind of like an industrial type standard. Because let's think about it. If a person takes the card and they're mining with the card, they're not gaming. Isn't that industrial? Because you're using something to make financial gain through an industry. You're buying a bunch of video cards, killing the gamers on prices, and yet you're trying to resell those cards afterwards, maybe for a little cheaper. But if these cards are virtually almost all going to fail very fast, they're completely ripping people off.
And I'd say the majority vote would go to yes, I would buy a used graphics card on Mining Bench. Now let me explain why, because a lot of people who buy mining graphics cards will be setting the fan speeds to 100%, but they'll also be dropping the TDP power limits to around 80%, sometimes even less. And now with that, your graphics card, essentially these graphics cards that are mining, could be your graphics card because you could be buying it for a really good price. These graphics cards essentially have been run underpowered. So they're not generating as much heat. So heat kills components, we know this, but also overclocking as well, overvolting. If these things are being undervolted, underpowered, and they're running at 55 to 60 degrees all day, every day, they're running under that safety spec. They're running really well. So they'll be absolutely fine.